Again, it gives me great pleasure to present here. And the top title, Treatment for Lung Inflammation and Fibrosis, look no further than the liver. See, I thought let me give some fancy title for that. So since whatever I speak today, it's all about the bile acids. So we all know that bile acids are synthesized in liver and it is secreted into the bile duct and stored in the gallbladder. So we here worked on bile acid and looked at its therapeutic efficacy in reducing lung inflammation and fibrosis. So over the another couple of minutes, you will be looking at what is the importance of bile acids in lung inflammation and fibrosis. So before, let me just give small introduction about the lungs. So we all know we breathe in and we breathe out. Without that, we don't live. We die. So one of the important organ of our body is the lungs. So if that has to function properly, definitely the structure should be normal. So if the structure of the lung and the cells which are present in the lungs, if they are damaged, definitely the function of the lungs will be collapsed. So here you see the anatomy of the lungs. You can see we have trachea, which is actually connecting it to lungs, and you can see the bronchial tubes. And even if you go in depth, if you take this part of the lung, you can see the pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, which are involved in bringing blood in and out. And also you can see alveoli, so bronchioles, alveoli, these are the cells that are important in order to exchange the gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, as I mentioned, if there is any damage, definitely it is going to affect the function, lung function. So let me straight away go to the asthma. See, we have heard asthma. There are billions of asthma patients across the globe. So it's simple. Where when you go to, like yourself, you can diagnose, or when you go to doctor, definitely the doctor will ask you, what are the symptoms? So any anybody like will identify the disease based on the symptoms. So the symptoms include these coughing, wheezing, the tightness of the chest, shortness of breath, and excessive fatigue. So these are some of the symptoms that are seen during the asthma. So what is asthma? It's a chronic inflammatory disease. So if you can see in this picture, this part of the lung is a normal lung, whereas this lung, it looks different from the normal lung. It is the asthmatic lung. So I hope you can see the difference in the trachea or bronchioles. So you can see here, you can see the inflammation swollen, and also there is some accumulation of mucus. I will be showing next. So airways actually, they get inflamed. So there will be swelling and there will be increased mucus production in the airways, and there will be deposition of various lipid molecules and mucus, and it also brings about the contraction of muscles around the airways or bronchosum, and that's the reason you will see the airways become smaller and narrower. That is because of the inflammation and the mucus production. So this happens not in a day or two. It happens when there is a chronic inflammation in the lung. So asthma involves inflammation. So this is again just to show you. This is the mucus you can see which is getting deposited, and there is a swollen the airway. and the muscles which are surrounding the airway, they become less contract and they become tight. So this happens over the course of period. So because inflammation later lead to the development of fibrosis, and that fibrosis results in the, again, hardening of the tissue. So during, you can see this is the normal, and you can see the normal airway in this case, and you take the section, you can see it is normal, whereas here you can see the deposition and tighten, etc. So altogether, asthma is characterized by airways inflammation, mucous metaplasia, airways remodeling, and hyperresponsiveness. This is how they decide when you go to the hospital. They will also look into the hyperresponsiveness, and then they will decide whether it is asthma or not. So together, altogether, inflamed lung and airway, subepithelial collagen deposition, excess mucus production, and smooth muscle cell hypertrophy altogether results in thickened airway wall, and thus, and also the tightened muscle, thus leading to the narrowing and constriction of airway. Thus, it results in decreased lung function. So you can see here, when it is normal, there is a normal flow of oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out. But when there is inflammation, when there is thickening of the airway, like, the alveoli, then it is getting damaged, then the supply of oxygen will become low and the lung is not properly functioning, which is not good. So if you look at the burden of asthma, asthma is one of the most common chronic diseases across the globe, estimated around 300 million affected individuals. And the prevalence is actually increasing day by day. We all know the reason. So it's due to industrialization, there are many factors. It's not one factor. There are many factors that lead to increased incidences of asthma, and especially it is one of the major cause of school and work absence. So healthcare expenditure on asthma is very high, and the most of the times the developed countries and developing countries are facing a lot of issues because of asthma. And this is the map which shows the highest incidences occur in the USA, America, and Australia, and the United Kingdom. But even you can see India is not behind. It has moderate around, it stays in the third stage. But with over the years, maybe we also fall in this category because increased air pollution may lead to the asthmatic, and also the allergens are very important. So as I mentioned, there are many factors. Allergens are one of the major factor or major triggers which lead to asthmatic condition. So it can be animal dander from feathered. You can see in at home. So we have pets, we have different animals. Even the dander that comes out of the animals can result in like it can be allergen. So cockroach droppings are the allergen. Dust mites are the important allergens. That is about 50 to 80% of the allergic asthma is due to dust mites. So molds and pollen can be allergens. They all trigger asthma. Additional triggers, as I mentioned, that can be weather changes, upper respiratory infections, or cold air, or strong emotions, and even exercise. The heavier exercise can lead to asthma. So let me, as I mentioned, like dust mites are the major uh, allergen that lead to um, allergic asthma or allergic airway disease. So in this study, actually, we used house dust mite to induce allergic airway disease in mouse models. So why did we choose? Because house dust mites is the commonly found complex airborne allergen, and they're typically asthmatics are allergic to HTM, that is house dust mite, and it will activate multiple receptors actually on airway epithelial cells so that, see, it can mimic exactly like whatever we see in the asthma, so that we can study all the growth factors, cytokines, and different parameters. So repeated exposure to HTM actually induces all the hallmarks of asthma, including fibrotic airway remodeling. This is the picture of the HDM. So you can see here fungal spores, chitin, innate pattern recognition, receptor ligases, chitinases, and immunogenic epitopes from the house to like house dust mite can act and result in the allergic asthma. So what happens? Like there is, we need to think when there is trigger. So it can be, cell mediated and humoral mediated immunity. And here we need to understand, in case of inflammation, there are cells that are important, which play important, like, crucial role in bringing up or in initiating the inflammation. So the allergens can act on macrophages, dendritic cells, and further it can act through the Th2 cells. And in case of asthma, the Th2 response is more. And it also acts on mast cells and eosinophils, neutrophils. All together, you can see there is the nerve activation and epithelial shedding, and there will be mucus hypersecretion, hyperplasia, and ultimately there will be, subepithelial fibrosis. So altogether, these further can affect the smooth muscle cells and lead to the fibrosis. So inflammatory cells include mast cells, eosinophils, all these structural cells also. Those structural cells include epithelial cells, smooth muscle cells, and they can these cells can mediate through these some of the factors, and the effects can be bronchospasm, mucus secretion, AHR, that is airway hyperresponsiveness, and structural changes that can lead to the fibrosis. So let me introduce another concept here. So we all know about endoplasmic reticulum, its importance in health. So for each, like, if you take any cell, you will find endoplasmic reticulum. They are important for the biosynthesis, folding, assembling, and modification of proteins. But when there is viral infection, or when you treat cells with the toxins or nutrients or oxidative stress condition or any allergen, so definitely they will trigger or induce the protein synthesis, and thus cell has to fold it, because if there is a protein synthesis, definitely cell has to fold it. So when this happens, the load will be more on endoplasmic reticulum to work more. So that imbalance between protein synthesis and folding in rough endoplasmic reticulum will lead to the stress. It is similar to us. So if I give more of work to anyone, it's going to be stress. So this is referred as endoplasmic reticulum stress. The stress which is put on endoplasmic reticulum, and that results in unfolded or misfolded protein accumulation. So when this happens, it is called ER stress response or unfolded protein response. So this is an important mechanism that has been exploited in recent years to look for newer therapeutic avenue in treatment of inflammation and various disorders, including metabolic syndrome. So let me give you some like brief introduction about ER stress and unfolded protein response. Like you can see the normal cell and ER stress cell, that is UPR is unfolded protein response. So here in a cell you can see there are three canonical pathways called PERK, ATF6, and IRE1, which are actually triggered in case of ER stress. So when it is normal, these BIPs, that is binding immunoglobulin proteins, chaperones. So these chaperones will bound to these molecular receptors on the cell. And but when there is increased, pressure in synthesizing more of protein, and then there will be accumulation of unfolded proteins. Obviously, these chevrons will leave from this because they have to work and fold these proteins, excess misfolded or unfolded protein. So when these chevrons leave the PERK 86 and ARE1, automatically these become active. So when they're bound, it is inactive. When they're they leave for their work, then these three becomes active, and this in like activation of PERK 86 and ARE1, actually it is adaptive. So it is not like, because body always try to, nature has its own way to balance. So it will try to, fold and bring about the, reduce the burden on ER, but ultimately it leads to the UPR, that is unfolded protein response, and there will be enhanced apoptosis, there will be endoplasmic reticulum associated protein degradation, and there will be upregulation of ER stress response genes that I'm going to talk about later. So this whole thing was explained long ago, and it is now well established canonical pathways in inflammation and other disease conditions. So here I don't give you much explanation. So there's ATF6, PERK, and ARE1, how they get activated and how they work. So all the three canonical pathways ultimately leads to the production of UPR target genes, and also there will be increased redox enzymes, and there will be cell death, there will be chaperones like kind of XBP1, and there will be CHOP, which is apoptotic one, and there is also enhancement of lipid synthesis chaperones and ERAD proteins. So so far it has been shown in various disease conditions, such as like neurodegenerative diseases. It has been shown the involvement in the hyperglycemia, inflammation, and also diabetes. It has also been shown obesity is one of the important disease condition where the ER stress has been established. So it is also studied in the atherogenesis. That means the ER stress is involved in various disease conditions. So we, see, when I was doing my postdoc, so Vikas and group, actually, they were working on the osteostomy, and they showed for the first time that osteostomy also induces ER stress in airways epithelial cells. So they used HNE, the means nasal epithelial brushings from the human subjects, patients, and they also looked at bronchial epithelial cells. In both the cases, they looked at some of the parameters which actually increased: GRP 94, 78, ERP 57, 86. These are all involved in ER stress. So it was clear that the HTM induces ER stress markers. So later, the ATF6 alpha and ER57 knockout mice exhibited decreased airway inflammation and airway hyperresponsiveness and fibrosis, which actually gave a clear idea that these ER stress plays an important role in lung inflammation and fibrosis, especially in allergic airway disease. So the ATF6 alpha deletion decreases the airway inflammation and also hyperresponsiveness, because ATF6 alpha is known to induce protein disulfide isomerases, that is PDI and CHOP, and this activation of ATF6 alpha induces ER stress mediated cell death, and this model was used, so where the HTM was used to challenge the mice, the C57 mice wild type. So, and also we used ATF6 alpha knockout mice. So here you can see this is the protocol which we use to induce the allergic airway disease in mice, and euthanized on 21st, day 21st. And then we can see, like we always do, differential cell count just to look at the inflammatory cells. And we found that, like, in the HTM, definitely there will be increased eosinophils and also lymphocytes, whereas in the knockout mice, the levels were significantly decreased. That shows that the ATF6 plays an important role in inflammation in airway. So, and also we looked at RN. So RN is the Newtonian resistance, which actually represents the resistance of the central or conducting airways, which is important to assess the lung function. So here, definitely we could see the deletion of ATF6 alpha could show that it can protect from the methacholine-induced airway hyperresponsiveness. Further, the ATF6 alpha deletion decreased HTM-induced ER stress, so which was seen by the markers. ERP57 mRNA went down, and also the fibrosis, which is actually analyzed based on the content of hydroxyproline. So we could see the less amount of hydroxyproline in, because it indirectly gives you the amount of collagen in the lungs. So here you can see, here it is the immunostaining for the alpha SMA, which shows that the ATF6 alpha knockout mice showed decreased fibrosis. So we all know that, like, ERP57 is increased in asthmatics. That was shown in patients. So we looked at the samples from non-asthmatic as well as asthmatic, and we were able to show that it has increased expression of ERP57 in asthmatic patients. So that shows that there is involvement of ERP57 in asthma, and also the arbitrary units were compared and was found to be significant. We also looked at the comparison of the ERP57 score compared to the eosinophils and also the bronchodilator response. And all these studies helped us to understand that the ER stress plays important role in as allergic asthma and also the asthma. Okay, so now we could say that yes, ER stress is important. Then we actually like plan such a way that using, like, some of the chaperones, the chemical chaperones, can we inhibit ER stress so that it can be one of the therapeutic strategy in asthma? Why we need to come up with the new strategy? See, we all know that it is not easy to treat severe asthma, though there is a research going on for the years because of various reasons. Because of the pleiotropic scenario, it is not easy to treat severe asthma, and there is a mixed T helper cell response, there is a steroid resistant bronchial inflammation and airway remodeling. Because of all this, it has been difficult to treat asthma. So we thought, okay, let me see, for example, if you take steroid resistant asthma, there are 5 to 10% of the patients, because right now, whatever the treatment they're giving is steroids. So about 5 to 10%, they're not getting benefited. So we thought of, okay, can we find a new way? So that's why we looked into this. And we are looking for the compounds which could target here either of these three canonical pathways, so that it will block the upregulation of UPR target genes, and thus the allergic asthma comes down. So that was our idea. So for that reason, we were doing literature search, and we found that we were actually surprised to see one of the article was published maybe around 80 to 90 years ago in China. So, and we also came to know that in China, bile acids have been used for various disease conditions, especially heat-related conditions. So bile acids are one of the molecules that are synthesized in our body. These are stearic acids. They're found in the bile of mammals and other vertebrates. They are usually, when they're produced, they're single, but immediately they get conjugated with either taurine or glycine, so that it will get secreted into the bile juice. So becomes bile salts. Since these molecules have amphipathic molecules, that they actually act as surfactants and facilitate digestion of dietary fats and oils, and also they are important part in metabolism. So in humans, you can see glycocolate, which is the conjugate of glycine, and cholic acid, taurocolate, which is a conjugate of taurine, and cholic acid. We can also see the cholic acid, and it's always circulated in the enterohepatic system, which is highly efficient in humans and also important physiological system, not only just for nutrient absorption, and it's also involved in xenobiotic disposal. And apart from that, so far it has been shown that metabolic, it is also important for the maintaining or maintenance of metabolic homeostasis. So as I mentioned previously, people have been used some of the bile acids, and one important bile acid that was used as ER stress inhibitor was the chemical chaperone, that is tauroursodeoxycholic acid. So it's commonly called as TUDCA, and it's an endogenous amphiphilic bile acid, which is a taurine conjugate form of ursodeoxycholic acid, and it has been used in ancient Asian pharmacopoeias for its supposed beneficial effects. This is the structure. You can see there is a similar taurocolate. With this resembles almost taurocolate, which is present in our system. So later, it's important to note that it is also present in trace amounts in human systems. So, but it is present in larger quantities in polar bear. I don't know exactly what is the function of TUDCA in polar bears, because it contains more than 50%, compared to human. So later it has been shown that TUDCA can play an important role as therapy for acute MI, obesity-induced myocardial cardiac contractile dysfunction, by decreasing UPR, that is unfolded protein response, apoptosis, and protein aggregation. Later, it is also shown as an important candidate in atherosclerosis, diabetes, obesity, etc. So it has both anti-apoptotic and cytoprotective activities, and it has been, used in clinical trials. That's a good thing, because these studies were done in the clinical stage in using animal models, but later it has been taken for the clinical trials, and these are the clinical trials which is being tested for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and TAC, and also hepatobiliary disease in cystic fibrosis. So our hypothesis, as I mentioned, we just know that when this BIPs saffrons, when they are bound to PERK, they are inactive. Whereas when there is when you give or when you are exposed to osteotamide, definitely there will be increased production of protein. Thus, these saffrons will dislocate from PERK, IRE1, and ATF6 in order to the fold those proteins. When that happens, these small PERK, IRE1, and ATF6 becomes active, and that's the reason they are bringing. So what we are thinking is, when this is happening, when you provide the bile acids or conjugated bile acids, they will go and bind these receptors so that they do not become active. That is our hypothesis. In order to prove our hypothesis, we did a couple of experiments. We wanted to see whether TUDCA works here or not. So we did 3 different regimens. One is preventive regimen, therapeutic regimen, and also we did the third one to see the re-challenge regimen. So in preventive regimen, we wanted to see, from the, when, for example, there's a difference between prevention and cure. So when you say cure, it is actually after the onset and development of disease condition, you want to cure. But preventive measures means prevent from getting the disease. So here what we did is, initially I will talk about preventive and then therapeutic and re-challenge. So here in this protocol, we actually challenged the mice, international challenge on day 1 and day 8, and then it booster doses, and continuously we gave on day 15 to day 19. So we challenged them continuously, and during the disease progression, actually, we gave TUDCA to these mice through nasopharynx. So that means it is not complete development of disease condition, but we are already introducing the TUDCA. So that's why we called it as preventive regimen. So preventive regimen, when compared to, for example, here you can see we are comparing the cell counts here first. So because we were interested in inflammatory cells first. So is there any effect on inflammatory cells? So we collected BALF, bronchoalveolar fluid, Loas fluid. We collected and we subjected for the differential cell count, and we were able to see the decrease in this total cell count and also eosinophils and the neutrophils, macrophages, and lymphocytes when compared to the HDM challenge to mice. So that means TUDCA could decrease the inflammatory cells, the number of cells, and based on that, we could say that it is decreasing the infiltration of inflammation. So next, we wanted to see whether this corresponds to the inflammatory chemokines and cytokines. So we looked at IL-13, IL-17A, IL-6. We looked at only the major, cytokines and chemokines pertaining to the allergic asthma. So CCL20, GCSF, and KC and IL-4. So we were able to see there is the significant decrease in the IL-13 and IL-6 and the CCL20 and these things, and also GCSF. So based on that corresponded well with the inflammation's anti-inflammatory activity. So further, we looked at the methicillin-induced airway hyperresponsiveness, which is an important parameter in understanding whether it worked in the lungs function or not. So as I mentioned, RN is the Newtonian resistance, which represents the resistance of the central or conducting airways, and the G, it is called tissue dampening, which is closely related to the tissue resistance and reflects the energy dissipation in the alveoli. H represents the tissue elastance, and it also talks about energy conservation in the alveoli. So you need to have decreased the tissue resistance and the Newtonian resistance. So TUDCA could show we used different doses and could show significant decrease or improvement in case of RN and also H, but not the G. So further, we looked at some of the ER stress markers, and we found that the 1 mg and the 5 mg TUDCA could decrease in per kg body weight mouse. You could see decreased expression of GRP94, ATF6, inactive form and active form, that is ATF6, 90 and 50, AR57 CHOP, which is apoptotic, and you can see the clear difference in case of, this is the HDM1, where we give only HDM with PBS, and these are 0.5 mg and 1 and 5. So, and further, we also did the gene expression analysis, and we could see the ERP57 and also the ATF6 alpha, GRP78 and 94 were actually decreased in the TUDCA treated HDM in challenged mice. So further, we looked at mucus metaplasia, that is the accumulation of mucus. So this picture can clearly show you in the HDM challenged mice, you can see the accumulation of mucus, whereas when the TUDCA treated mice, it was significantly decreased. So further we looked at, because we wanted to see whether the gene or some of the factors which are associated with the mucus get reduced or not. So MUC5AC, MUC5AC and GOB5 as well as XBP1 as the splice variant of XBP1 were actually analyzed, and we could see there is a significant decrease in the GOB5 and the MUC5AC along with the XBP1, which are important in mucus metaplasia. Further, we looked at hydroxyproline content or levels in the lungs, and we took lungs from all the different group of mice, and we looked at, and hydroxyproline was found to be significantly less with the 1 mg per kg body weight TUDCA treated animals when compared to the HTM. So in summary, the TUDCA attenuated HTM-induced ER stress, airway inflammation, mucus-related genes, and also airway hyperresponsiveness. That is, especially as I mentioned, it could only reduce, improve central airways resistance and elastance. Airway fibrotic remodeling is also. So next we wanted to see whether it is so, like, because we were giving during the disease progression, we wanted to see whether it can, reverse the inflammation and fibrosis if we give once the disease has already been established. So what we did is here, after completion of the HTM challenge, we started giving. Like in these points, we didn't give TUDCA, and later we did give TUDCA 5 doses, and we euthanized the mice and looked at the parameters. Again, we could see the eosinophils, neutrophils, macrophages, and lymphocytes were decreased, but unfortunately, the numbers were very low. So we were thinking why it happened. That is a common sense question. So the disease has been, developed, and you are extending the study from 21st day to 29th. That means there are 8 days. Sometimes placebo works. So there was some resolving even without the help of TUDCA, but definitely there was still the indications or significant uh, inflammation in the airway, which were actually markedly decreased by 0.75 milligram per kg body weight TUDCA in these mice. So we looked at all the inflammatory cells and also these chemokines and IL-6, which showed that the TUDCA, even in the therapeutic regimen, could decrease airway inflammation. So further, we also looked at airway hyperresponsiveness, which is important, as I mentioned, because the lung function is ultimately which is important for the exchange of gases. So it could improve the resistance of the central or conducting airways, and also dampening and the tissue elastance. Further, it also showed that it could decrease the mucus metaplasia, especially at one dose, that is 0.75 milligram per kilogram body weight. And you could see in our study, we were surprised and to see there was no dose dependent, decreases. So at 1.8 again it came back. So maybe that may be due to um, unknown reasons, and because anything is too much, I think it's going to result in other conditions. So next, we also looked at the genes which are associated with mucus, and we found that the 0.75 milligram worked best. And then we looked at some of the ER stress markers, and you can see ER57, 94, GRP94, GRP78, and CHOP, they were decreased in the significantly decreased in the 0.75 milligram per kilogram TUDCA and GRP94. We also looked at mRNA. The beta-actin was used as the internal control. Then we also looked at alpha smooth muscle actin staining, and here we could not see significant, decrease in the collagen content. That means it is not significantly decreasing fibrosis. And we were thinking both the cases, both alpha SMA as well as the collagen content did not agree, I mean, it did not show significance. And we were thinking maybe it is because of self-resolution. We were thinking of, we also see the number of cells, inflammatory cells were low when compared to the preventive. And we were thinking maybe self-resolving. So we thought, okay, let's see what happens if we re-challenge them. See, because you are seeing less number of inflammatory cells in therapeutic regimen. So now we wanted to give one more dose of HDM after the therapy. So we see here the summary says it decreases ER stress, airways inflammation, mucous metaplasia, and HR. So based on that, since we had questions there, we went with the next thing. So here in the previous one, we just add a TUDCA here. We didn't add the HDM, but we wanted to re-challenge them and see what happens, whether it will trigger. So we reintroduced this HDM challenge here and then euthanized the mice and looked at, and again, we could see the number of inflammatory cells coming up back. So that means you need to get repeated exposure to any allergen so that the inflammation will be, it will continue in a chronic way. So inflammation plays an important role for all other events in any disease conditions. So we also looked at IL-13, IL-14, IL-4. They were found to be significantly decreased. And we also tested, actually, we just wanted to check whether the TUDCA alone at this, dose. We didn't check other doses because we were interested in only 0.75 TUDCA dose. So we also looked at whether it itself does anything to lung, normal lung. So we didn't find any adverse effects with the 0.75 milligram per kilogram body weight. So these are the results which shows the marked decreases in the inflammatory cytokines and also inflammation. So we actually also continued working on the lung function, means airway hyperresponsiveness. So the TUDCA actually protects the mice from methacholine-induced airway hyperresponsiveness by improving RN, G, and H. And then we also looked at what happens with the metaplasia. The same thing, we found that there is a decrease in the mucus accumulation here. So, but TUDCA itself did not do anything because it didn't, you can see here, TUDCA alone did not change anything. So it was actually corresponded with the MUC5 and GOF5 levels. And further, we did alpha smooth muscle actin immunohistochemistry and compared with the IgG control. And as I mentioned, again, we could find there was a decrease in the airway fibrotic remodeling. This may be one reason why we saw that like inflammatory cells may also help in decreasing fibrotic scars. So the hydroxyproline assay also showed that there was a decrease in the fibrosis in TUDCA treated mice. Further, we looked at ER stress markers, ER57 and ATF6. We were interested in this. So, and also we looked at the XBP1S and also CHOP, and we were able to see the significant decreases in all these parameters that are associated with UPR, that is unfolded protein response. And in summary, the HTM induced ER stress proteins that were, we show that the ATF6 alpha and ERP57 plays a critical role in airway inflammation and fibrosis, and the ER stress inhibitor chaperone, TUDCA, attenuates all the pathologies associated with allergic asthma, and inhibition of ER stress by chemical chaperones could be valuable strategy in the treatment or management of allergic airway disease. And based on this, this work, later they worked further on other bile acids, and they were able to see alanine beta mucuric acid along with TUDCA, because they used different mice, bulb C mice, and they also looked at and they found that it is decreasing the ER stress as well the allergic airway disease conditions in those mice too. So this study um, gives a way to come up with the newer possibilities to target the asthma, allergic asthma. So I thank Dr. Vikas Anati for giving me opportunity to work with him, and also Sidra and others, and also Matthew Pointer and Yuan and all other members who helped me. And the funding was from NIH R01. So thank you.